May 1st has long been celebrated as a day to highlight the contributions of workers and their struggles for economic justice. That's the purpose of a local gathering planned for tomorrow by the May 1st Coalition of Chelsea, East Boston, and Everett. Joining us is one of the organizers, the political director for United Food and Commercial Workers, Local 1445, Gabriel Camacho. Thank you very much for being with us, Gabriel.
You're welcome, Chris.
Yeah, but I want to ask you about your union, your workers, because a lot of us, for as long as we can remember, we probably seen people like these workers in supermarkets around the country, and you know, I honestly, I didn't think of them as essential, like first responders, emergency responders, but it turns out during the pandemic, things look quite different.
Yes, quite a bit. As background, our local 1445 represents approximately 14,000 workers throughout Massachusetts. And we're mostly known as the face of the stop and shop workers, those who work as cashiers in the deli department, in the meat department, those who bring the carts out from the parking lots and put them in an orderly fashion, those who clean the stores. But we also represent industrial laundries. Those are these huge facilities that wash the linens of hotels and hospitals. We also represent meat packers and various meat processing and packing facilities. Um, and we also represent retail workers, such as those in Macy's and also in cannabis dispensaries. So we have quite a few workers that actually make the economy run and keep consumer goods and, of course, food items flowing and stocked in the supermarkets. So March of last year, the governor ordered two executive orders during the pandemic. One was enumerating the job titles that are considered essential, and the second one was those industries that need to be kept open in order for basic human survival and for a semblance of an economy to run. So, under those executive orders by Governor Baker, grocery store workers, supermarket store workers, meat packers were considered essential. So while the vast majority of services and industries in Massachusetts shut down, our workers reported 24/7 to their shifts at Stop and Shop and other facilities that were considered essential. Um, However, it was only until April 19th of this year that our grocery store and supermarket workers were able to get vaccinated. This took quite some time to get accomplished. We had Representative Carmine Gentile of the 13th Middlesex send a letter to the governor that was signed on to his colleagues in the House and Senate, asking the governor to vaccinate supermarket and grocery store workers. After that letter was sent, about a week later, the governor did allow our essential workers, the members of our union, to be vaccinated. Um, and what we've been doing is trying to urge the governor to have the vaccination itself sent to the work sites so that our members can be vaccinated there. And, and and we offered a plan. The plan would be you give us the vaccinations, and we would use the employer's infrastructure to have our members vaccinated. The governor's the administration rejected that proposal. Basically said go to the website and go to one of the uh, mega vaccination state sites. But our issue is that a lot of our members work part time. They have two or three jobs. they have families or go to school and have family obligations. It's almost impossible to take time, assume that you have good internet at home, get onto the Massachusetts website for vaccinations. And of course, it was a fiasco when it first rolled out. And then wait until you get an appointment at one of these mega vaccination sites. Our members take public transportation. They cannot afford to take time off of work in order to go to these huge sites and wait on literally in line to get vaccinated. So what we did in turn was we started working with local governments, cities and municipalities and their departments of health and human services, as well as community organizations. And that was a lot more successful. So what happened was, I'll give you a couple of examples. One was we had a pop-up clinic staffed by the Equity Clinic in Worcester. And the pop-up clinic actually was physically located in the parking lot of a Stop and Shop in Worcester. So we got a lot of our members vaccinated that way. Another example is that we worked with the city of Boston and their Department of Health and Human Services to get appointments for our members to get vaccinated at the Plumbers and Gas Fitters Union Hall in Dorchester. And that was rather successful.
Gabriel, I want to ask you about what was really driving all these efforts to get the shots, because if you look, I saw some national figures for your union about the number of people who got sick or even died from COVID. Those are pretty big numbers.
Yes, they are pretty big numbers, especially in the meat packing industry throughout the country. Many of our workers contracted the virus and unfortunately died. Um, and the federal government had very poor response to that, did not enforce any of the voluntary guidelines for safety at the workplace. It was really up to the unions to fight with the employer to provide protective equipment for our employees. It was up to the unions to make sure that there was plexiglass between cashiers and customers. So we really fought hard. And there was a lack of political will from the federal government to enforce these voluntary guidelines. The other thing I should say is that in our industrial laundries, as I said, these are huge facilities that wash the linens of hotels and hospitals. The ones that actually wash the linens in hospitals, there's these bags that come in with the biohazard symbol. So that indicates that these linens may be contaminated with COVID-19. And yes, indeed, some of our workers did contract the virus working in these facilities. However, these workers were not considered essential, even though the hospitals were considered essential and hospital personnel were vaccinated. So what we did in turn, let me just finish here, if I may. What we did in turn is that we used our staff to, we rented vans, our union rented vans to take our staff from 2 industrial laundries and take them to the Reggie Lewis Athletic Center to get vaccinated. And that was the way we got those workers vaccinated.
Here, I want to ask you about things going forward, because even if the pandemic subsides, there will be some threats with us going forward as well. So what about legislation to protect workers?
Well, one piece of state legislation that we are supporting is called hazard pay for essential workers. And what that would do is essentially give workers time and a half for those categories and services that are deemed essential. That's one thing. The other thing is that it would require the employer to provide personal protective equipment at no cost to the employee, as well as making sure that work areas are able to socially distant. And the other thing is that it would also allow workers who think they may be exposed to the virus at the workplace take time off without retaliation from the employer. So that's one of the bills that we are supporting in terms of protecting our members from the pandemic.
Here, I picture May 1st celebrations, outdoors, large numbers of people from all different kinds of workplaces. Maybe this year things have to be a little more compact. What will it be like tomorrow?
Well, let me just say that last year we canceled it altogether. And that was unfortunate. And in the past, the May 1st coalition of Chelsea, Everett, and East Boston used to do a march from either cities to a central gathering location, and thousands would be there, packed, of course, and marching closely on the streets. We couldn't do that last year, and we're not going to do that this year. So what we're doing this year is having a small rally at the food pantry of the Chelsea Collaborative, located at at 25 6th Street in Chelsea. And there we're going to have a series of speakers, including essential workers, youth that have been affected by the pandemic. We're going to have medical personnel speak as to how it is providing healthcare during a pandemic. We're also going to have union leaders speak to certain pieces of legislation that are pro-immigrant, including the driver's license bill that would allow the registry of motor vehicle provide driver's licenses to undocumented motorists, which is necessary in a pandemic and to get to work and to school and et cetera. And also a bill called the Safe Communities Act, which would limit the ability of local law enforcement to work with immigration and customs enforcement. So we're going to have a music, also a little bit of entertainment, but it's going to be a small gathering. It's not going to be huge as it was in the past.
Well, of course, one of the things this reminds me of, and as you explained even earlier in our conversation here, is that, there are things that workers need that would be very hard to gain on their own. And I guess this is a reminder why we need unions.
Yes, absolutely. Unfortunately, the past few decades, unions have gone down in terms of membership, and because the laws are so weak and outdated that it no longer serves the workforce of today. Corporations are far more ruthless and have almost limitless resources to challenge organizing drives. That is why one piece of federal legislation that we are totally on board, it's called the PRO Act, or Protect the Right to Organize. What this would do is that it would prohibit mandatory captive audience speeches by the employer during an organizing drive. It would also add teeth to federal labor law if the employer violates someone's right to organize a union. Right now, if an employer is found guilty of violating employees' rights to unionize, all they have to do is put up a poster on the wall saying, we're going to comply with federal law. That's it. There's no monetary penalty or anything like that.
Not a lot of teeth in that.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a joke.
Right.
So the law would provide teeth to any violation of labor law by the employer. It would also help facilitate in achieving the first-time contract or collective bargaining agreement with the employer. So there are many aspects to this federal bill, but it's something that would update federal labor law and certainly put us on an even keel with the employer during organizing drives.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to join us, and wishing you a happy May 1st and productive May 1st as well. Gabriel Camacho from United Food and Commercial Workers, Local 1445.